Classical music mysteries. Their relationship began with a single letter, and with a single letter, it abruptly ended. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. He was the most prominent Russian composer of the 19th century, yet there is a mysterious and crucial 13-year period in his life. Behind this era was a single widow, Nadezhda von Meck. Between them, there was an arrangement. It involved a massive financial allowance of 6,000 rubles a year. In Russia at the time, this was a staggering sum. It rivaled the annual salary of a high-ranking government official. For an average working-class family, it was enough to live on for nearly a decade. This money gave Tchaikovsky his freedom, but their relationship came with a single, mutually agreed-upon condition: we must never meet. As a result, the two never spoke face-to-face for the rest of their lives. All they exchanged was a massive volume of letters, around 1,200 of them, along with money and music. Why did they stubbornly choose to stay apart? And why did this incredibly strong bond have to be severed so suddenly? Today, we will unravel this bizarre story of Tchaikovsky.
Chapter 1: The Invisible Patron.
The year was 1876. Tchaikovsky was 36 years old. He held a professorship at the Moscow Conservatory. However, his salary couldn't cover his expenses. Exhausted by an overcrowded schedule, he was plagued by financial anxiety. Meanwhile, Nadezhda von Meck was 45. She was no ordinary wealthy socialite. After her husband's death, she took over his business supporting the Russian railway network. She was a shrewd businesswoman, managing a vast fortune. She had raised 11 children. She deeply despised the noise and vanity of high society. Her greatest comfort was music. In particular, she felt a profound connection to Tchaikovsky's work. Their first point of contact was established through a violinist named Kotek. It started with a simple request to arrange a few pieces. In return, she paid a fee far above the market rate. Eventually, after a request for a loan, von Meck made an extraordinary offer. She proposed paying him a regular, continuous pension. The amount? 6,000 rubles a year. This was more than double his professor's salary. It was more than enough to let him live entirely dedicated to his composing. But here's the critical part: the agreement forged between von Meck and Tchaikovsky. Let us never meet. Let our relationship exist only in letters. For the society-hating widow, this was a line of defense. But for Tchaikovsky, it was an absolute godsend. He was aware of his homosexuality. Because of this, he felt an immense burden from troublesome socializing and relationships with women. For him, not having to meet was the perfect arrangement. And so, bound by the promise to remain apart, this unique relationship was born. However, a famous recorded incident reveals just how fragile this setup really was. It happened in Florence, Italy in 1878. This was 2 years into their arrangement. Von Meck invited Tchaikovsky to stay in a villa located right next to hers. They were only a few hundred meters apart. They exchanged letters daily to carefully coordinate their walking schedules. I will go out at 11 a.m., so you should go in the afternoon. They went to incredible lengths to avoid running into each other. Then, one day, a mistake was made. Tchaikovsky was out for a walk, and suddenly he came face to face with von Meck approaching in her carriage. What did they do in that moment? They didn't rush toward one another. They didn't exchange warm greetings. Tchaikovsky hurriedly tipped his hat. Visibly flustered, von Meck gave a quick bow, and they simply passed each other by. Immediately afterward, Tchaikovsky wrote an apology letter. He expressed regret for making such a clumsy greeting. What does this incident tell us? It shows that they weren't just protecting a simple rule not to meet. They feared that if they ever met in person, the ideal relationship they'd built in their letters might shatter. Their entire bond survived because they both understood and shared this exact fear.
Chapter 2: Confessions as a Duty.
People usually talk about their correspondence as wildly romantic, and it's true. Their letters were filled with theories on art, views on life, and a shared, deep sense of loneliness. But when we analyze the surviving records, another layer appears. Their correspondence served as a highly detailed activity report for an investor. Tchaikovsky was an incredibly diligent letter writer. He recorded everything with precision. He wrote down where he was, how he spent his time, and who he met. He detailed exactly how much progress he made on specific compositions. This was his way of proving to his patron that her money was well spent and his creative work was on track. By reading his letters, von Meck felt she was witnessing the creative process firsthand. She gained a privileged sense of satisfaction from being the sole protector of a true genius. Tchaikovsky likely understood this expectation. He famously dedicated his masterpiece, Symphony No. 4, to her, calling it "Our Symphony." This was a profound token of gratitude, but it was also the ultimate presentation of his creative results. For Tchaikovsky, von Meck was a true emotional refuge. He confessed weaknesses he could never show the public. He even confided in her about deeply personal crises, like the complete collapse of his marriage. Through it all, she supported him. At a glance, the balance in their relationship seemed perfect. But this balance would slowly warp as Tchaikovsky became more and more successful as a composer.
Chapter 3: The Blind Spot of the Honeymoon Phase.
13 years passed. Thanks to von Meck's financial backing, Tchaikovsky resigned from his teaching post. He poured himself entirely into his compositions. As a result, his fame didn't just stay within Russia. It spread across all of Europe and eventually reached as far as America. Ironically, as the composer's success grew, he began earning plenty of his own money. Her financial role as a patron started to lose its meaning. And then an event occurred that would forever change the nature of their relationship. In 1884, Tchaikovsky's niece, Anna, married von Meck's son, Nikolai. With this marriage, their beautiful distance as the faceless patron and the artist completely crumbled. They had become actual, real-world relatives. And being relatives slowly dragged ugly, practical issues to the surface. Dowries, living expenses, future inheritance distribution. The 6,000 ruble allowance had always been respected as a service to art. Now, in the eyes of some von Meck family members, it looked like a massive financial drain going to an outsider. Many researchers point to one specific figure, Władysław Pacholski. He was von Meck's son-in-law and, coincidentally, a former student of Tchaikovsky. Pacholski reportedly began exerting intense pressure on von Meck within the household. As she grew older and weaker, her family planted seeds of doubt. They told her, "Tchaikovsky doesn't need your financial support anymore." On top of this, von Meck was hitting her own physical limits. She suffered from a chronic, severe illness and a nervous system disorder. Slowly, she lost the use of her right hand. Simply writing a long letter became physically agonizing. She faced pressure from the outside and decay from within. While Tchaikovsky was climbing the stairs to ultimate glory, von Meck was cornered by harsh interference from her own family.
Chapter 4: The Fake Declaration of Bankruptcy.
Autumn of 1890. A letter was drafted and sent to Tchaikovsky. It wasn't one of her usual, lengthy, affectionate letters. The tone was strictly business. It was cold. "Due to financial difficulties, I can no longer send you any money. Please remember me from time to time." It was, in effect, a letter cutting all ties. However, the reason she gave was far from the truth. The von Meck family did experience a temporary cash flow problem at the time, but they were nowhere near bankrupt. Later research reveals that her fortune was still vast. Squeezing out 6,000 rubles would not have been impossible. "I have no money" was simply an excuse to sever the relationship. It was highly likely a convenient front to pacify her pressuring family. How did Tchaikovsky react to this notice? His response had nothing to do with a greedy obsession over money. He wrote a reply immediately. "Do you truly think I would forget you just because the money stops? Your words have deeply wounded me." He sent back a letter filled with heartbroken confusion and protest. By this point, he was entirely financially independent. He was receiving a pension from the Tsar. He wouldn't have struggled to survive without von Meck's allowance. What crushed him was the sudden, one-sided slamming of the door. This woman had been his best friend and his guardian for 13 years. He was left with the sheer humiliation and grief of being discarded, without explanation and without a chance to defend himself. In his lengthy reply, Tchaikovsky begged to continue their relationship without the money, but a response from von Meck never came. Was her family blocking her letters? Was it due to her own deteriorating mental state? Or was it a combination of both? Today, we still don't know the exact cause. The only certainty is that their once passionate flow of words turned into eternal silence.
Epilogue: The Echoes of Silence.
3 years after they cut ties, it was 1893. Tchaikovsky died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, his sudden death was attributed to cholera. However, later theories have suggested everything from poison to suicide. According to records left by his brother, Tchaikovsky cried out von Meck's name in his deathbed delirium. Moments later, he uttered a phrase meaning "cursed one." Was he directing this at her, or was he lamenting his own tragic fate? No one will ever know his true meaning. Only 2 months after Tchaikovsky's death, Nadezhda von Meck also passed away, as if following him to the grave. Confined to her sickbed, she was reportedly heartbroken by the news of his death, yet she passed away without leaving behind many words about him. Their relationship cannot be summed up with simple words like love or friendship. It was a sacred pact formed to fulfill the noble mission of creating art. For the price of 6,000 rubles, she bought a dream, and he gained his freedom. And when that relationship was one-sidedly destroyed, perhaps they simply had to go back to being strangers. We live in a modern age where the distance between people is closer than ever, yet somehow farther apart. What does the bond between these two people, a bond that could only survive by never meeting, ask of us today? Thank you for watching. If you have your own thoughts, theories, or interpretations, feel free to share them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. See you in the next video.